The morning my son told me I wasn't welcome at my own grandson's graduation party, I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "All right, honey, you go enjoy it." And then I drove home, made myself a cup of tea, and called my attorney. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Frances, and I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a 3-bedroom house in Naperville, Illinois. The same house where I raised my 2 kids after my husband Gerald passed away from a heart attack back in 2009. Gerald was a good man. Quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. When he died, he left me the house, a modest life insurance policy, and a son who I thought would always have my back. My son's name is Leonard. He's 42 now. When he was young, he used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms and tell me I was the bravest person he knew. I kept that memory close for a long time, longer than I probably should have. Leonard met his wife, Nina, about 12 years ago at a work conference in Chicago. She was sharp, well-dressed, always knew the right thing to say in a room full of people. I tried to love her the way you love someone your child loves. I really did. But Nina had a way of looking at me that made me feel like an inconvenience she was tolerating for Leonard's sake. She never said anything outright unkind. She was too smart for that. It was always the slight pause before she answered me, the way she'd redirect conversation when I started a sentence, the way she'd glance at Leonard when I brought up something from the past, as if my memories of my own son were somehow taking up too much space. Their son, my grandson, is named Elliot. He turned 22 in March, and in May he graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in civil engineering. I was there for every step of that journey. Not just emotionally, I mean financially, practically, in every way a grandmother can be present. Let me be specific, because this matters later. When Elliot was accepted to U of I 4 years ago, Leonard came to me looking worn out. He sat at my kitchen table, turned his coffee mug in circles, and told me that things were tight. He and Nina had just refinanced their house in Hinsdale, and the timing with tuition was rough. He didn't ask me directly. Leonard never asked directly. He just laid it all out and let the silence do the asking. I said I'd help. I set up a payment arrangement with the university and covered $62,000 in tuition and fees over 4 years. I never once mentioned it at family dinners. I never brought it up in front of Nina. It wasn't a loan I expected back. It was a gift, because Elliot was my blood, and watching him work towards something real made me proud in a way I hadn't felt since Gerald died. Elliot called me every Sunday during his freshman year. We'd talk for an hour sometimes, about his classes, his roommate, a girl he liked, whether Chicago style or thin crust was a hill worth dying on. He had Gerald's laugh, that low, slow laugh that started somewhere in his chest. Those Sunday calls were the best part of my week. As the years went on, the calls got shorter. By his junior year, it was a text every few weeks. I told myself that was normal. Kids get busy. They're building their own lives. I wasn't going to be the grandmother who guilted him for growing up. This past January, Leonard called to tell me Elliot's graduation party was being planned for the Saturday after the ceremony. Nina had reserved a private event room at a restaurant in Hinsdale, the Copper Rail, one of those places with exposed brick and a menu where nothing has a price that ends in a 9. Leonard said they were expecting around 60 guests, colleagues of his and Nina's, Elliot's friends from school, Nina's side of the family. I said, "That sounds wonderful. What time should I arrive?" There was a pause. "Mom," Leonard said, it's a younger crowd, mostly, a lot of Elliot's friends. Nina thought it might feel more natural if it was just his generation, you know, less formal. I sat with that for a second. Are Nina's parents going to be there? Another pause. That's a little different. How is it different, Leonard? He didn't answer that. He said something about how they'd plan a separate dinner, just family, and that I could give Elliot his gift then. His voice had that careful flatness it gets when Nina is nearby and he's saying words she's approved. I told him that was fine. I said, "Okay, sweetheart, you go enjoy it." And I meant it to sound warm, but I don't think it did. I think it sounded exactly like what it was, a woman deciding, very quietly, that she was done. I did not go to the Copper Rail that Saturday. I drove to the graduation ceremony at State Farm Center in Champaign on Friday, sat in the bleachers with 12,000 other people, and watched Elliot cross the stage in his cap and gown. He saw me from up there. I was wearing the yellow cardigan he always said made me easy to spot in a crowd, and he waved. Just a small wave, a little sheepish, like he knew something and couldn't quite hold my gaze. After the ceremony, there was a brief moment outside where families gathered. Leonard shook my hand. He actually shook my hand, like I was a business associate, and Nina smiled that practiced smile and said it was so good that I came. Elliot hugged me, and I held on a beat longer than he expected. I whispered, "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Thanks, Grandma." And then the crowd shifted, and they moved away, and I stood there in the Illinois sun in my yellow cardigan, holding a card I'd brought for him. I drove the 2 hours back to Naperville alone. That evening I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Leonard had turned his coffee mug in circles and let the silence do the asking, and I thought about the $62,000. I thought about the Sunday phone calls. I thought about Gerald, who would have had something very plain and very certain to say about all of this. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney. His name is Patrick, and he's been handling my affairs since Gerald died. He's not dramatic about things, which is why I've kept him. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "What would you like to do, Francis?" I told him. The next Monday morning, Leonard received a certified letter. I want to be clear about what the letter said and what it didn't say. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't designed to punish. It was simply an accounting. A formal document outlining the financial support I had provided to Leonard's household over the past 4 years, totaling $62,000, now reclassified in my estate documents from a gift to a documented loan. The letter also noted that I had revised my will and that the property in Naperville, which Leonard had always assumed would come to him, would instead be placed in a trust with specific conditions attached. Patrick had advised me on all of it. It was legal, clean, and completely within my rights as the sole owner of my estate. I also quietly discontinued the monthly contribution I'd been making toward Nina's mother's assisted living costs, something I had started 2 years earlier when Nina mentioned, in passing, that they were struggling to cover the bills. I'd never told anyone I was doing it. I just did it because it seemed like the right thing at the time. When I stopped, there would be a gap. They'd figure out where it had come from soon enough. Leonard called me 4 days after the letter arrived. He didn't start with an apology. He started with, "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I let him talk. He said the party was Nina's idea, that he'd tried to push back, that he felt terrible about it. He used the word terrible twice. He said he knew it wasn't right. And then, after all of that, he said, "But reclassifying that money as a loan. Mom, we can't pay that back right now. We just can't." I said, "I know, Leonard. So what do we do?" "I don't know yet," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't performing mystery. I genuinely didn't know yet. I was still deciding what kind of woman I wanted to be on the other side of all this. A few days later, something happened that I hadn't expected. Elliot called me. Not a text, an actual phone call, on a Tuesday evening, which hadn't happened in over a year. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number at first. He was calling from a different phone, he said, because his was broken. He said, "Grandma, I need to talk to you." I said, "I'm listening." He told me he hadn't known I wasn't invited to the party until 2 weeks before it happened. He said when he found out, He told his mother he didn't think it was right. Nina told him it was already arranged and that I would understand. He said he should have called me then, and he didn't, and he was sorry. He said sorry 3 times, which is more than Leonard had managed. Then he said something that broke me open a little. He said, "You were always the one who actually showed up, Grandma. I don't know why I let that not matter." I had to put my hand over my mouth for a second. We talked for 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was the longest we'd talked since his freshman year. He told me about the job offer he'd accepted at an engineering firm in downtown Chicago, how he was looking for an apartment, how the rents were making him dizzy. I told him about the garden I was trying to get started in the backyard, how the squirrels kept winning. We talked about Gerald. Elliot had been only 11 when his grandfather died, but he remembered him. He remembered that Gerald used to keep butterscotch candies in his shirt pocket and always had one to offer. That detail undid me completely. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house for a long time. Here is what I decided. I did not forgive Leonard, not yet and not easily. The thing he had done wasn't a small thing. Being disinvited from a celebration that I had quietly, entirely funded, not even knowing I was being kept out, not being told directly, being managed around like a problem to be minimized, that was a kind of betrayal that doesn't dissolve with one uncomfortable phone call and the word terrible said twice. But Elliot was different. Elliot had called me from a broken phone on a Tuesday night and said the thing that needed to be said. And I had been 67 years old long enough to know that the people who do that, who actually say the hard thing, who call when they don't have to, those people are rare. You don't take those people for granted. I called Patrick again. I told him to keep the will revision in place. Leonard and Nina's situation with Yusisquat would remain as I had restructured it. The loan documentation would stay on record. But I also told Patrick I wanted to set up a separate, smaller trust, something direct just for Elliot, not contingent on anything, not tied to Leonard, not something that could be complicated by whatever happened between me and my son, something that was purely between me and my grandson. Patrick asked me how much I was thinking. I told him. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said, "Frances, that's very generous." I said, he remembered the butterscotch. Patrick didn't ask me to explain that. The weeks after that were not easy. Leonard and I had a real conversation, not the managed one over the phone, but a face-to-face one at my kitchen table, which is where the real conversations in our family have always happened. He came alone. Nina did not come, which I think was wise on her part. We sat across from each other, and for the first time in a very long time, Leonard looked like the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. He cried. I hadn't seen him cry since Gerald's funeral. He said he had let Nina make decisions he should have made himself. He said he had been telling himself for years that keeping the peace at home meant everyone was okay, and he understood now that that wasn't true. He said he was sorry in the way people are sorry when they've finally stopped defending themselves. Not strategic sorry, not sorry, but just sorry. I didn't tell him everything was fine. I said I heard him. I said I needed time. He asked about the loan documentation. I said it would stay for now. He nodded. He didn't argue. That told me something. We didn't hug when he left. But he did pause at the door and say, "I love you, Mom." And I said, "I love you too, Leonard." Both of those things were true. Neither one of them made what happened okay, but they were true. About a month later, Elliot took the train out to Naperville on a Saturday morning. He brought coffee from a place he liked in the city. Some light roast in paper cups that Gerald would have described as expensive water, and we sat in the backyard, and I showed him what I was trying to do with the garden. He helped me stake the tomato plants. He is not a natural gardener. He almost pulled one up by the roots trying to be helpful, and I had to swat his hand away, and we both laughed. He helped me put up a wire barrier along the fence that I'd read would discourage the squirrels, though I was not optimistic. Before he left, he hugged me in the driveway and he said, "I'm not going to be bad at showing up anymore, Grandma." "I mean that," I said. "I know you do." I watched him walk to his car. He had Gerald's walk too, that slight lean forward, like he was always heading somewhere with intention. It hit me in the chest the way those things do. I went back inside and stood in my kitchen for a minute. $62,000, 15 years of Sunday dinners, months of phone calls that got shorter and shorter, a graduation party I wasn't welcome at, a certified letter on a Monday morning, and a boy who called me from a broken phone on a Tuesday night and remembered the butterscotch. Some things in life cost you everything and give you nothing back, and some things cost you everything and return something so small and so specific and so exactly right that you understand, standing in your kitchen on an ordinary afternoon, why you paid it. I made myself a cup of tea. I looked out at the garden. The wire fence was already looking unsteady. The squirrels would probably win. I decided I didn't mind very much.